Ooh. Okay, I got a problem with that sentence. No one thinks that way. You're just given this little he said, she said. I will say kudos to the reporter. That's all true, except for the billowy outfits part. What is there, though? There is security at the gates, under scrutiny. By who? My name is Levi Browdy. I'm the executive director for the Falun Information Center. I'm also the father of 2 Shen Yun dancers. Today, we'll walk through a recent New York Times article about Shen Yun. The article is the latest in a long series of reports taking aim at Shen Yun, an American company facing an unprecedented attack by Beijing to sabotage its operations and destroy its reputation, right here on U.S. soil. Hello, folks. The New York Times recently published a new article on Shen Yun Performing Arts. Today, we're going to dive into this article line by line and see how it holds up to scrutiny. Now, as some of you may know, the New York Times has done a whole series of articles on Shen Yun Performing Arts over the last year or so. Our nonprofit, the Falun Information Center, had done a deep dive analysis on the first set of these series of articles on Shen Yun. I'll include the link below on the report that we had done. We found that these articles were riddled with inaccuracies. They demonstrated extreme levels of bias. They failed to disclose very important conflicts of interest and other issues to the reader. And overall, I felt painted a very, very misleading picture of Shen Yun Performing Arts, a company that we've been studying for many, many years. So let's see how today's article stands up. We'll dive right in. Okay, starting here with the title, An Army of Child Laborers, in quotes, enriches Shen Yun ex-dancers say in suit. Okay, so immediate, right off the bat, a red flag here. Anytime I see a title of an article in quotes, it sort of makes me wonder, what is the news that was worthy to publish here? Is it the fact that the someone said something, or is it the substance of what they said? I would think it would be the substance, and in that case, I would hope the journalist would go through, make sure the substance is accurate, solid, and just put a title that the paper feels confident to stand behind. No need for a quote. So a little bit of a red flag there. I have a whole bunch to say about Army of Child Laborers, but we'll get into that in a minute. I'm sure they'll address that further on as we go through the article. The subtitle here, the group performing traditional Chinese dance has been under scrutiny for its treatment of performers and financial practices. Okay, I find this to be quite misleading. Under scrutiny. By who? Certainly, Shen Yun Performing Arts has been the target of a massive transnational repression campaign by the Chinese Communist regime to sabotage, vilify, and destroy the company. That is well-documented fact. In fact, we did a special report, the Falun Information Center did a special report on that, which will also include in the comments a link below so you can read about that. So certainly the Beijing has been scrutinizing Shen Yun for a very long time. But again, they don't say by whom. The implication, of course, is being that there's something maybe wrong with the company, and it is generally under scrutiny. The fact is, over the last year or so, it's the New York Times that has led the charge and really been the only ones scrutinizing Shen Yun. Now, out of the New York Times reporting, there's other inquiries and things happening, but it really started from the New York Times. So I think this is a little disingenuous just to generally say it's under scrutiny. The New York Times is the one that scrutinized him, or again, maybe they're referring to Beijing, in which case it's a lot more than scrutiny. It is a very serious and aggressive campaign of transnational repression. Not sure about that subtitle. Okay, let's dive in. 2 former dancers for Shen Yun Performing Arts, the traditional Chinese dance company, filed a lawsuit on Thursday accusing the group of amassing a financial fortune and worldwide renown by subjecting an army of child laborers, in quotes, to brutal working conditions and psychological coercion. Okay, a couple things to clarify. First of all, if you look at the press statements that Shen Yun has sent out, one of the things they've made clear is that they have 8 companies that tour the world simultaneously, and each company's got a whole troupe of dancers, orchestra, and so on. Across those 8 companies, on average, 85% of the performers are adults, with 15% being minors, very talented young people that can join the adults while performing. Those ratios alone do not, in any shape or form, constitute an army of child laborers, first of all. Second of all, The cornerstone of a Shen Yun performance is classical Chinese dance, and this is a young person's game. Some of the very best in the world at classical Chinese dance are 17, 18, 19, early 20s. You sort of have to think of it kind of like Olympic level gymnastics, where it's not uncommon to have a 17-year-old, an 18-year-old win gold medals, 19-year-old, and so forth. And so if you're the very best in the world at that age, you were likely very, very good, even when you were 17 or 16 or possibly even 15. And so that is an important context to remember when you're looking at the Shen Yun performers. But my biggest problem with this paragraph is that final phrase, brutal working conditions and psychological coercion. Okay, so full disclosure, I have 2 adult sons who have been performing with Shen Yun for about 5 years now. And they went to the schools where a lot of Shen Yun performers are trained, which shares the campus with the Shen Yun headquarters up in New York, and I'll talk about that in a moment. I'm very close to my sons. I always have been. And not just them, I'm very close to some of their friends. When they have a day off, sometimes they're coming back here at my house. They bring their buddies. We have barbecues. We go out to movies. I know these guys very well. It is not our experience in any stretch of the imagination that this is simply brutal working conditions that exhibits that has psychological coercion. That's just a gross mischaracterization of what life is like as a Shen Yun performer. Certainly a gross mischaracterization of our experience, of my son's experience and their fans. I'll get more into that, but I wanted to just make a clear note of that at the beginning. Okay, second paragraph. The lawsuit by the former performers Sun Zan and Cheng Qingling is at least the second civil action targeting the group and its leaders since the New York Times last year detailed the treatment of performance and financial practices at the arts company, an arm of the Falun Gong religious movement. Okay, well, the first part of that sentence I believe is true. It is the second civil action, and they seem to be admitting it was all triggered by New York Times reporting. Detailed by the treatment of performers. What they don't really tell you is this is a very select, cherry-picked group of performers. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But this last part of the paragraph, I think, doesn't sit well with me. An arm of the Falun Gong religious movement, a movement? We're a religious movement? Look, a couple things about Falun Gong. So Falun Gong is a Buddhist-based spiritual practice. And while originated in China, it is now practiced in over 100 countries around the world. Its books have been translated into 50 languages. And it's not a hardly structured organization. There are no membership. There are no fees. There are no any of these structures you would normally have in religious groups. None of that exists for Falun Gong. People who want to practice Falun Gong can download the book for free, start reading it in their living room. They can learn the meditation practice online for free. Do that in the living room. And so this idea, just this whole idea of arm of religious movement, we sound like some sort of government or even military here. And I just don't like the wording here. I think it's very misleading to the substance and character of what Falun Gong actually is. So anyway, third paragraph here. Federal criminal investigators have also been examining possible visa fraud at Shen Yun. Okay, don't know about that. And New York State has been investigating the group's compliance with labor laws. I believe there is an inquiry from New York State, but what they don't tell you is that for 17 years, the New York State Labor Department had no problem with Shen Yun. It was not until the New York Times took aim at Shen Yun, and then in one of their earlier articles, actually took aim at the Department of Labor, started criticizing their practices, implying because they're not investigating, I guess, what the New York Times wants them to, and lo and behold, a New York State Department of Labor inquiry was open. So I would guess that the New York Times has something to do with that. And again, after 17 years of Shen Yun operating and not having a problem. Advertising a glimpse into China before communism, Shen Yun performs hundreds of shows a year featuring acrobatic routines by performers in billowy outfits. That's all true, except for the billowy outfits part. I'm not sure about that. The group also serves as a messaging platform for Falun Gong, promoting the teachings of its founder, Li Hongzhi, and portraying the Chinese government, which has banned and persecuted its followers, as evil. So we're portraying the Chinese government as evil. All right, two problems here. saying that we're portraying the Chinese government as evil as if that's some sort of novel idea or just an untested opinion. Let's be clear. The Chinese communist regime is responsible for 60 to 100 million deaths of its own people since it took power in 1949. Through violent campaign after horrific campaign, it has been absolutely devastating to the Chinese people and the culture of the country. By any objective measure, and if you look at the reports of any government or human rights organization, this has been extremely evil. So to put it this way, like we're portraying it as evil, it's like sort of our take on the world. This is objective reality, just how horrific the Chinese regime, the Chinese Communist Party specifically, has been for the Chinese people. This is not simply our portrayal. Okay, so if you look at the middle of this paragraph, though, it says the group, Shen Yun, serves as a messaging platform for Falun Gong. Okay, so this is, I think, highly misleading by omission. And again, they're not really telling you so much more about what they could be in this point. If you go to Shen Yun Performance, which I would highly suggest, it's really an amazing experience. You see on stage in the course of 2 hours or so, 5,000 years of Chinese history. You see all these spiritual traditions of China, Buddhism. You see stories of Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, amazing works of poetry. You see the characters from the great works of Chinese literature, all on stage in the performance. Now, yes, you also see portrayals of modern China, specifically the tyranny of the CCP, the courage of the Falun Gong practitioners and their supporters to peacefully stand up to that tyranny. And the faith of those courageous people does come through, absolutely. You see the message, you see what drives them, what you see the substance of their faith. All that is on stage, but it's all that. It's not just a messaging platform for Falun Gong, as if you're just going to go to the show and listen to a lecture about Falun Gong. It's not that at all. It's much, much bigger and much grander than that. So a little bit of a problem with that part. Okay, Shen Yun accumulated $266 million in assets by 2023, the lawsuit says, while performers worked up to 15 hours a day in training and on a crushing tour schedule with little pay. Okay, I don't know how much money Shen Yun has accumulated. I do know it is highly successful. They have sold out shows all over the world. It's not surprising they're doing well. So, okay, there's that. Performers worked up to 15 hours a day. Look, I mean, I think if I just look back to my high school years, especially during, basketball season, if you look at all the classes and the homework and practice, all that, I'm sure at times would add up to 15 hours a day. Certainly not every day. Who could maintain that? And that is also true of my boys and all the performers that I know about. And the problem I have with this, it makes it sound like they get up at 5 a.m. every single day and they don't go to sleep until 15 hours later. And that's not our experience. That's not the experience of my sons or their friends or anything like that. So, yeah, I find that misleading. Okay. Crushing tour schedule for little pay. Let's hold on to that for a second. Move to the next paragraph. The child laborers were paid generally no more than $500 a month, less than the price of a pair of orchestra seats at this year's Lincoln Center performance, according to the lawsuit, which was filed in federal court in Manhattan. This whole article seems to be according to the lawsuit. It doesn't seem to have much, if any, original reporting. That's a little disappointing, but there you have it. Okay, so little pay, child performers, all this is grossly misleading, I believe. And let me explain why. Okay. In upstate New York, Shen Yun has its headquarters at a 400-acre property called Dragon Springs. Dragon Springs is a religious nonprofit. It's got a beautiful set of Buddhist-style temple buildings there, and that is where Shen Yun has its headquarters, its training facility, and so on. The campus also has Fei Tian Academy of the Arts, a boarding school registered with the state of New York, and Fei Tian College, also registered with the state of New York and accredited by NETCHI. So these are two bona fide schools where talented young people go primarily because they're interested in the Shen Yun Performing Arts. They want to either become a dancer or a musician, and so they go to this academy, which again offers a standard New York State curriculum. but it has a core competency in the performing arts and music, dance and music. And so the students who do really well, whose artistic level is high enough, they can be invited to tour with Shen Yun, and the schools intentionally have a flipped schedule. So if you look at the academy and the college, Fei Tian Academy, Fei Tian College, which again shares a campus with Shen Yun, they have a flipped calendar so that they can go through the two main academic semesters while Shen Yun is not on tour. And when the Shen Yun tour starts, again, the really talented academy, mostly college students who are good enough, are invited to tour with Shen Yun. They're all on full scholarship at the academy and the college. They get to, if they get invited to tour, they get to perform shoulder to shoulder with professionals. They get to perform in some of the most prestigious venues around the world. Every expense on the tour, including some recreational activities, is fully paid for. They're getting credit. These are students on a practicum program that is part of a curriculum that's approved by New York State. None of this is conveyed to the reader here. It makes it look like Shen Yun hires children directly, has children employees, and pays them very little. Again, there are professional artists with Shen Yun, but there's also student performers. And these student performers, again, full scholarship, getting credit, everything's paid for. I mean, imagine going to a private high school, a private college, and graduating, and every single student graduates with not a penny of debt. And some of them who are good have a few years of experience performing on the world's most prestigious stages with professional artists. That's what you have. Student performers alongside adult performers. None of this is conveyed to the reader. And so I find this very misleading to even talk about pay for child laborers. Okay. Representatives for Shen Yun and Falun Gong said in a statement that the allegations are false and present a distorted picture of our organization, our mission, and our faith. Okay, that's true. I myself, as with the Falun Dafa Information Center, along with Miss Ying Chen, who is a conductor for Shen Yun, we actually received emails from this reporter prior to publishing the article where they wanted to comment, and kudos for them including this particular comment. I was weighing in on the Falun Gong side. Miss Ying Chen was weighing in on the Shen Yun side, and it looks like they include one of our quotes. So great. We operate, in quotes, we operate with integrity and are committed to upholding the highest artistic and ethical standards, said the representatives, Ying Chen for Shen Yun and Levi Browdy for Falun Gong, me. They said Shen Yun uses both professional and salaried performers and students following a state-approved curriculum, what I just explained to you. And they said that a few former performers were spreading a false narrative pushed by the Chinese government, while many more performers and their families have defended Shen Yun. Okay, so all that's true. Kudos to the New York Times reporter for including that. We actually sent a fairly lengthy statement, and they pulled just a bit out, but they seem to have pulled the part that's most relevant to the substance of the article. So I think this was well done. My main problem, though, is the word many at the very bottom, and I want to explain why. So where it says many more performers and their families have defended Shen Yun. And there's a link. And that link goes to a website called Shen Yun Community, which was a website that was built sort of organically in response to some of this negative reporting, where a lot of the professional artists combined with the student artists came together and they said, hey, let's make a website where you can, give some transparency into our lives. What are our lives like? What's our training like? What's this whole Shen Yun thing about? And they put together this website. One of the tabs on that website is a petition. And this petition was, again, put together by the community at Shen Yun, the performers, and some of their family. And what's notable about this petition is the number. Over 1,500 current and former performers, along with some of their immediate family, mostly parents, signed this petition that says, among other things, quote, "We are horrified to see the gross distortions and false narratives about our work, our faith, and our way of life echoing through mainstream media." And they go on to talk about what's been happening and why they're so horrified about that. So if you look at the New York Times series of articles, they really have a core group of, I'd say, 8 or 9 or so that they've really built this narrative. They quote more than that, but if you really look at the substance of all the articles, and I think there's been 11 or 12 at this point, it really comes down to that, less than 10. That they've crafted this narrative of army of child laborers and such. Stack that against 1,500, over 1,500 current performers, former performers, and their families saying this is nonsense, this is a gross distortion, it's not out at all what we're about, what our faith is about. And I think that deserves more credit or weight than the word many. I think that is dramatically underplayed. So, yeah, there you have it. Okay, moving on. Mr. Sun and Miss Chung, who married after leaving Shen Yun and now live in New Zealand, were featured in the Times coverage. That's true. They were featured in earlier reporting. Each had parents who were adherents of Mr. Lee. Ooh. Okay, I got a problem with that sentence. They're adherents of the Falun Gong faith. Again, it's a Buddhist-based spiritual practice. And if you look at, there are tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands at this point, testimonies online for people all across China and around the world about their experience of practicing Falun Gong, why they started, what they get out of it, the fact that the core principles of Falun Gong, roughly translated as honesty or truth, compassion and resilience or tolerance or forbearance, adopting these principles into their life, doing the meditation, doing the slow motion exercises, trying to become better people in line with these principles, trying to let go of attachments, destructive tendencies that sort of, are self-destructive or that harm your relationships, and trying to bring out the better part of yourself and the better part of other people around you. That's what Falun Gong is. That's why people follow it. That's why people practice it. And to characterize it as adherents of Mr. Lee, like it's adherence to one man, really plays into the cult narrative. And it's just not, no one thinks that way. We don't talk that way. We don't operate that way. Certainly, we have great reverence for Mr. Lee, the founder of Falun Gong. He has made these teachings public that have changed literally tens of millions of lives around the world, from helping with minor health problems to catastrophic, difficulties in their life, to just bringing more health and balance to people's lives, giving them more energy, making them more optimistic. That's why we practice. It just so this way of characterizing it as adherence of Mr. Lee, as if the whole practice is just following around one man, and that's all it's about, is, I think, terribly disingenuous. And again, I don't think it's out of ignorance. I think these reporters have been studying Falun Gong and Shen Yun long enough that they would know that. Or perhaps they don't. Maybe this is really their perspective and they're only seeing from that one perspective. But it's just, again, I practice Falun Gong for more than 25 years. We don't think this way. We don't talk this way. It's very, it's a great disservice to just talk about it that way. Anyway, so let's finish this whole sentence. So each had parents who were adherents of Mr. Lee, who teaches that people can attain enlightenment in part by following his regimen of meditation and exercises, and has implied that he created the universe. Okay, so following his regimen, meditation, exercise to attain enlightenment. Look, that's not specific to Falun Gong. You find that in almost every single Buddhist school of teaching across the world. There's nothing unique or interesting about that, I think. Very standard. They don't inform the reader there about that, but anyway, and has implied that he created the universe. Okay, look, the founder, Mr. Lee, has written enormous volumes of teachings. The main book, Zhuang Falun, many other books, countless lectures have been published as books. This whole volume of teachings, and again, if you want to understand, I think the point of good journalism is to understand what is actually happening in the world. What is the real story, specifically about regions or people or issues that you're not familiar with. You're relying on the news to tell you because you've never been there. You've never met these people. You don't know what's going on. And so I would think the point of reports about Shen Yun, which invariably are going to touch upon Falun Gong, is to give the reader some insight. What do these people think? What do they like? What drives them? And to sort of, this is one of the only parts where you sort of get a hint of it. Oh, we're adherent of a man who implied he created the universe. You're missing the entire picture of what Falun Gong is about, why we practice, the benefit we get out of it, what we believe. So much of that is lost. And I have to think, unfortunately, that was intentional. Because again, I would think these reporters have been studying this long enough to know that there's a lot out there they could be saying here, if they wanted to give their readers a complete and genuine picture of what Falun Gong people believe, what the workplace culture at Shen Yun is really like, and what drives these people. What's really going on here? So anyway. Okay, Mr. Lee started Shen Yun in 2006. I think that's true, although it wasn't just Mr. Lee. It was a whole group of people doing that, but okay. And expanded it rapidly at Dragon Springs. Well, okay, again, the wording here is weird. It implies that sort of Mr. Lee came in here and demanded or decreed that it expand and forced it to expand. It expanded because of the popularity and success of Shen Yun, like any organization. They put out a product, the people love it, they pay, they come to see, you grow, you can expand. So that's how it expanded. Anyway, his movement's 400-acre headquarters located northwest of New York City. That's true. Dragon Springs, where Shen Yun is headquartered, is 400 acres, and it's northwest of New York City. Okay. The suit describes Mr. Lee as the mastermind of the entire forced labor scheme. Okay, again. All right, we'll get to that in a minute. Naming him as a defendant along with his wife, Liu Rui, and two schools that Mr. Sun and Miss Chung say were used to create the pretext of educating performers. Miss Chen and Mr. Browdy, myself, said the schools provide a quality education and their students excel. Okay, so this brings me to a criticism I have of modern journalism in general, where too much of the story that's presented to the reader is a he said, she said, when the reporter already knows, or at least could easily, with a little extra effort, find out what's the truth. Is it really as simple as just this person says that person says that, and who knows? And that's sort of what they leave it at, is these plaintiffs are saying it's a pretext for educating performers, meaning the schools aren't real, they're fake. And myself and Ms. Chen are saying they provide a quality education. Who knows? Okay, let's look at some objective facts. First of all, the SAT scores. That's something you could look at. Every student at the Fei Tian Academy takes the SATs, and time after year after year after year, they're well above national and state averages, period. Okay, so if this is a pretext, it's sort of a fake school, what is it? These kids are all like wonderkins and they don't have to go to school or be taught anything, and they just magically do really, really well on the SATs, all while also carrying a very heavy load in the arts. Or are the schools doing their job and they're educating these kids? Another thing you could look at is, where do these kids go? Yes, most of the kids who are at the academy are there because they want to get good at dance or music, and they want to go on to the Fei Tian College that's also on campus and get good enough to actually tour with Shen Yun. Vast majority of the students are there for that reason, no doubt. But not everybody. Sometimes their interest goes elsewhere, or they're just not good enough. They don't hit the artistic level you need to be at in order to tour Shen Yun. And so some of the kids who graduate from academy go into other colleges. Some of the kids that graduate from Fei Tian College go on to other graduate programs. Places like Harvard University, Columbia University, Duke University, NYU, the College of William and Mary, Illinois University. I mean, I could just go on and on and on. So these kids are testing really well, and they're going on and being successful at elite colleges and universities around the country. You tell me, is this a pretext and a fake school, or is there a quality education where the students excel? Again, none of this is disclosed to the reader. You're just given this little he said, she said, and you have to sort of figure it out or sort of fill in the holes yourself. So I have a problem with this paragraph. Okay. The lawsuit accuses Shen Yun of forced labor, human trafficking, and other violations of the Federal Trafficking Victims Protection Acts, seeking damages for physical and psychological injuries. Okay, I mean, I think all that's true. That's what they're alleging, and that's the law that they're alleging it. Again, not my son's experience, not all of their friends' experience, but that's what they're alleging. One of the former dancers' lawyers, Carol Merchantism, I hope I didn't mess up that name, has specialized in cases involving abuses in religious and spiritual. Okay, they have a lawyer. Mr. Sun was sent by his parents across the world to Dragon Springs at 15. Okay, again, the wording here was sent by his parents at age 15, and Miss Chung arrived at 13. Okay, first of all, what's the implication there? Is he implying sent against his will? If so, I don't have questions for Shen Yun. I've got questions for the parents. Is that the best idea? Should you be doing that? Not sure about the wording there. The fact that there were 15 and 13, okay, that's standard. It's a boarding school. That's how old you are when you go away to an academy and boarding school. They're sued to describe the high-fenced compound as akin to a... okay, I'm sorry. Their suit described the high-fenced compound as akin to a penal colony, in quotes, with performers confined there through psychological and physical control and their passports locked in a safe. Representative for the group said holding passports for safekeeping is normal at boarding schools and they are returned upon request. Okay. Their suit described the high-fence compound as akin to a penal colony. All right. A few things about Dragon Springs, the campus where these schools are and where Shen Yun is headquartered. First of all, there are exquisite authentic Tang Dynasty Buddhist temple grounds there that are just amazing. Every person that I've seen go to the campus and I've done tours with are just blown away. It's absolutely amazing. It's some of the most authentic Tang Dynasty architecture you're going to find in the world. So you have those temple buildings. You have these the education buildings there where the academy and the college are, and these world-class facilities for Shen Yun Performing Arts, and that's the whole campus, and it's all on a 400-acre campus. And I'll tell you, if I go to the campus frequently, I do some volunteer work there. Again, my sons are there. I go see sort of their final exams and some of our performances there. We do festivals up there. If I stand in any one of those buildings and I open the door and I walk, I'm going to walk into a forest. And if I keep walking, I'm going to go off campus into another forest, into a neighborhood. There is no wall around this complex which would constitute a compound. Hence, it is not a compound. There's like sections of the campus where there's these fencing. And I think that's mainly to keep like deer out and stuff. But every time there's a fence, there's a gate with no lock, and you just push it and you walk out. So again, no wall, not a compound. What is there though? There is security at the gates. There is very good security at gates, and there's reasons for that. First of all, many college, even corporate campuses around the country have security at the gates for obvious reasons. Particularly for a school. You've got kids there, you've got young adults there, you want to keep them safe. It is all the more necessary for Dragon Springs, which is a target of the Chinese Communist regime for transnational repression. These days, especially as these New York Times articles have been coming out over the last year, the campus gets a bomb threat, a threat to do a mass shooting or to come in and rape and kill the female students. A threat like that is coming into campus once or twice a week nowadays. It started, in the middle of last year. There have been unknown Chinese persons that breach the gates in their car and get onto campus. There have been all kinds of security breaches, or attempted security breaches, I should say. Security is a really big deal. The Chinese regime and their thugs have beaten up Falun Gong people all across America, all around the world. There's a real security concern, and my boys are on that campus, and they damn well better have very good security at the gates, and they do. That doesn't make it a compound, Okay, again, you walk in, it's a beautiful campus, there's no big wall, and it's just a wonderful place to be. So this whole idea of Haifan's compound penal colony, I find ridiculous. Performers confined there through psychological and physical control. Again, not my son's experience, not the experience of other performers. So I'll leave that at that. Passport locked in the safe. I think that's fairly standard for boarding school academies, perhaps. I don't know. But they give them back anytime they need them, so I don't know if that's an issue. So performers had a dreadful existence, in quotes, of 6-day work weeks full of training and religious practice, the suit says, and just 2 or 3 hours of classroom time per day. Instructors allow Mr. Sun to cheat on exams and sleep in class because of the priority given to training, the suit says. Okay, let's talk about this dreadful existence of 6-day work weeks full of training and religious practice. The classical Chinese dance that Shen Yun does, I think has no peer in the world. These are elite of the elite. Some of the very best classical Chinese dancers in the world are at Shen Yun. It is a place for elite training. Again, much like you'd find at an Olympic gymnastic training facility, or perhaps in South Florida in those elite tennis academies. You go there because you want to be among the very best when it comes to classical Chinese dance or the orchestra. And that's why you're there. And a lot of these people are driven, whatever you want to call them, a personality, A-types, what have you. And they love it. That's why they're there. So if that's not what you're interested in, and you don't want that level of focus, and you don't want to reach that level artistically, not the place for you. Also, the religious practice. So training, again, dreadful existence of training and religious practice. Everyone up at Dragon Springs practices the Falun Gong faith. Every day there's time for meditation, and they often do it in groups or what have you. Every day there's time to sit and read Buddhist scripture. You are there with people of a shared faith, and that is one of the things that people love. It helps strengthen your own faith. It helps sort of bond with each other. It helps each other elevate in the faith. It is a wonderful, wonderful place to be if you are a practitioner of Falun Gong. And I don't think that's unique to Falun Gong. I think faiths all around the world have come together in their own communities and have a place where you've got people who shared faith and all the benefits you get of that. So if you are describing as dreadful a place where you can be trained to be among the best in the world in your artistic endeavor and be in a community of shared faith with people with whom you share a faith, and have that help strengthen your faith and let you explore it further, that's precisely why people are there. That's why they love it. That's the real draw to Shen Yun. And I think, again, as a reporter, your job is to explain what's not obvious on the surface, I would think. What is the heart and soul of this organization? It's how wonderful it is for the people that are there to do the training and do the religious practice. Again, so if someone is describing this as a dreadful existence, I would say, you're in the wrong place. Leave. It's a free country. Leave. You don't belong there. Yeah, I don't know what to say further about that. They've taken what is not only the heart and soul of the organization, but the very reason that attracts people and why people love it, and they've tried to say that that's the reason it's a dreadful existence. This reminds me, I grew up in New Mexico. I had a couple of friends go to one of the military academies in the region after they left high school. It was interesting. I talked to them a couple of years after high school, and one of them came back and they're like, "Yeah, I loved it. We did this and we did that, and it was like great." And I talked to the other person again, same high school, same military academy, and it was a horrific story. Didn't have enough to eat. He was abused. It was like the people were tyrannical, and He quit halfway through. How is it that two people from the same background, go to the same place and tell two different stories? One of them clearly loved what the military academy was teaching and the environment they were providing. The other didn't want to be there. It wasn't their thing. And so I think that's at play here. And I would hope that good journalism would take a look at this and say, okay, you've got a whole group of people saying that's wonderful and I love it. You've got a group of people that's saying they hate it. What's closer to the truth, and what are the numbers? And again, if you look at the numbers of the petition, over 1,500 people are saying, we love the training, we love the religious practice, that's why we're here, and these reports greatly distort who we are, what our faith is, and how we live our lives. And then you've got, a handful, less than 10. Maybe there's a few more of that if you're just going to take extra little quotes here and there, but the core is like less than 10, I believe. I think that's very, very disingenuous. And it seems to me that this tiny group is getting all of the coverage, and the 1,500 or over 1,500 are remain voiceless, not being heard. So, yeah. Again, the latter part of this paragraph, where instructors allowed Mr. Sun to cheat on exams. Okay, I wasn't there. He shouldn't be cheating on exams. I don't think my sons do that. And sleep in class because of the priority given to training. Okay, again, they're calling into question the validity and the effectiveness of the schools. Again, look at the SAT scores. Look at the schools where people go to after they leave. The proof is in the pudding. Okay. Humiliation and violence were commonplace, the suit says. A late arriving child laborer could expect to have an instructor's shoe strike their head moments after walking in. They were told such treatment was an indication of talent, and so they should be thankful for being beaten. Okay, I don't know these two plaintiffs. I can't speak to their experience. I wasn't in the room. Again, going back to my own son's experience, or actually, this humiliation and violence were commonplace. Never heard of violence against happening in the school or in Shen Yun Company. And this humiliation thing, I know dancers, friends of my son's who, they were in public schools out there in California or different parts of the country, and they were facing what you face sometimes in public schools, bullying in particular. And it wasn't until they came to the Fei Tian schools on Shen Yun's campus where they really were could come into their own. And as he described it to me, they sort of let their guard down. They had sort of, a safe space, a place where they can be themselves, a place where they can sort of bond with people and not worry about bullying anymore. So in their experience, it was the exact opposite. It also reminds me of many cases I've heard about the schools where, there's a lot of obviously ethnic Chinese there. And they describe growing up in America, and especially parts of America where there are not a lot of Chinese or Asians. And sort of, I remember a couple stories, one in particular about, growing up in the West and sort of feeling ashamed and weird because their English wasn't great, and their mom was kind of weird because she's Chinese and doing Chinese things, and she'd like tell her mom when her friends come over, don't cook the smelly dumplings, cook regular food, macaroni cheese or something, and trying to fit in, feeling like a little bit ashamed of their culture. And they come to Fei Tian and they come to Shen Yun, and wow, they blossom. They see the grandeur of what their real culture is and how amazing it is, and they come into their own. They have pride about their culture. They embrace their culture, and they embrace the idea that their culture has something very universal in it that they can offer to others. And they do that through the Shen Yun performance. And you see these people really blossom coming into the organization. And so humiliation, again, not our experience, and I think there's a lot of the exact opposite. That has a hint, though, of the previous paragraphs where, again, if this is not the place for you, you don't want elite training. I imagine on elite training, sometimes people get in your face when you do something wrong, and you are pushed. That's certainly true. That's part of elite training: sacrifice, rigorous training, being pushed within obvious common sense boundaries. Perhaps they were humiliated by that. Again, I don't know these plaintiffs. I don't know their story. Okay. Leaders instilled fear by shaming rule breakers at school-wide assemblies. Around 2011, a school principal berated Ms. Chung's roommate for looking at pornography. Okay, if that's true, you shouldn't be looking at pornography. It's a religious school. When she had actually been reading Japanese comic books known as manga, the lawsuit says. Okay, I wasn't there. I don't know. Like other performers, Mr. Sun and Ms. Chung said they performed through injury and without medical treatment. Mr. Lee teaches that only faith can purge the body of illnesses. Okay, so this first sentence is a narrative that is common in many of the New York Times articles that have been published recently, this idea of performing through injury without medical treatment, discouraging medical treatment. Okay, let's start with objective reality. I look at my sons, their friends, a lot of the performers that I know. There are many, many cases where in either a small injury or even a serious injury where common sense is employed. They go to the doctor, they get treated. Just my younger son, a couple years ago, was feeling some pain in his lower back. His company manager sent him to the doctor, actually one of the best sports medicine doctors here in New Jersey. Turned out to be nothing. He just needed like a heating pad or something and do some stretching. So there's a lot of that. There's also some serious injuries. Again, it is an elite dance training center. And so one of their best friends actually just before the tour this last year was doing a flip and I think snapped his Achilles tendon and just snapped. And, that's very serious. He went to the doctor. He had surgery. He's in Taiwan right now doing rehab. And I know just case after case. One of the performers flew back to Korea. He's Korean and got surgery on his knee. Another performer's, again, another Achilles injury was sent to Chicago, went to Detroit, I think, because one of his friends or maybe someone at Shen Yun had a connection with the surgeon that handles the Detroit Pistons. And so, again, objective reality, there's all kinds of cases of performers getting medical treatment, getting better, doing rehab, and getting back on stage. Case after case after case. It's just fact. And so if this whole idea that people are performing without medical treatment today at Shen Yun is just nonsense. In fact, I remember that same doctor who treated my younger son, he went on a podcast shortly after these New York Times articles came out, in which he told the story that when they first came out, they were reading the article in his office, his doctor's office, and the people in his office were saying, this is ridiculous. We just had 3 Shen Yun performers in his office just that month alone. So again, objective reality, this is not true. I'd also like to point out that, again, looking at this last sentence, Mr. Lee teaches that only faith can purge the body of illnesses. Again, the word there, only. I'm sorry, that's just blatantly false. I'll just pivot over and look at the main. If you look at the main book of Falun Gong called Zhuang Falun, this is the primary text of the religious faith. There's a section in there. I think in lecture 7 where he's talking about modern diseases and the difficulties that some of them present. And he says very, very clearly right here, quote, "This doesn't mean that conventional medicine isn't capable of curing disease. Of course, it can. People would lose confidence in it otherwise and avoid it, so it can heal people." So again, this is a lot of problems with this paragraph. This last sentence is just blatantly false as it's worded, and to couple that with this false narrative about Shen Yun performers not receiving medical treatment for injuries is very, very misleading in my opinion. What I also don't like about this is they're overlooking a key element, and that is the healing efficacy of meditation more broadly and Falun Gong specifically. There have been studies done on meditation in its preventive medicine efficacy, but also just regenerative, sort of the ability to heal yourself faster and get better faster. That's true of meditation in general, and it is definitely true of Falun Gong specifically. Again, there have been many studies. Some were done in China, some more recently here in the United States, that show Falun Gong makes you really healthy. That is a fact. And so there are some dancers who actually will have a minor ailment or something happens to them, and very quickly they're just better. It's not that they don't go to their doctor because they were forbidden. They don't need to. By the next day or 2 days later, they're back on their feet. They're doing well. And so the healing efficacy of, again, Falun Gong is completely missing from this picture, and that is part of the equation. Again, good journalism should pull out all the nuances and the realities of the objective world and help you understand them. And so if you look at Shen Yun, you do have a lot of medical treatment going on. You do have Falun Gong helping people stay healthy, or if they get injured, get healthy quicker. And also you do, again, it's an elite training systems, you do sort of have the Mamba mentality, to borrow a phrase from the late Kobe Bryant. You do have some of the elite dancers, and you see this across disciplines. You see this all throughout ballet. You see this in professional sports. There's some people that are out there, and they're going to go on stage no matter what, and they play through stuff or they perform through stuff. Some of the elite professionals, sometimes they have mentality. Sure, you're going to get that mentality at Shen Yun. But again, you have to come back to objective reality, and that is case after case after case. You see performers at Shen Yun, when they get hurt, if they get hurt, getting medical treatment. Period. Hard stop. Next paragraph. Mr. Sun suffered internal bleeding when an instructor told other students to force him into a side split. He had to hold that position for 10 minutes a day for 3 months and has scarring on his legs, the suit says. Okay, I don't know these plaintiffs. I wasn't there. I can't speak to his experience. I mean, it is elite dance training. Dance training involves a lot of stretching. Flexibility is a really important part of classical Chinese dance. So there's a lot of stretching, and particularly in the beginning, it can be very painful at times. But again, both my sons went through this. This kind of extreme behavior is not our experience. After Ms. Chung suffered a training injury that made her left arm go numb, Mr. Lee ordered a school principal to meditate with her rather than arranging treatment. She has permanent damage to her shoulder, the suit says. Okay, again, I can't speak to this person's individual experience. I wasn't there. That is not our experience. Okay, and that's the end of the article. So overall, I don't think there's a lot of original reporting here. Most of the paragraphs are just quoting line items from a lawsuit. I mean, this looks like a press release for the lawsuit targeting Shen Yun. That's what it looks like. Because there's not a lot of extra lawsuit. They're just sort of reporting. They're just sort of reporting what the lawsuit says. Mind you, anybody can file a lawsuit and say anything they want. And so to just take whole sections of a legal complaint and put it into an article, and that's your article, seems to be lacking at best. So overall, I find this article, well, I will say kudos to the reporter. They did not only include statements from pieces of the statement that we gave them, but he looks like he chose the parts of the statements that were relevant to the substance of the article. Appreciate that. But overall, I think for a reader trying to come in and understand what is really what's going on at Shen Yun, how are the performers treated, I find this article is grossly distorts reality, in my opinion. It is nothing like what my sons experience and their friends and everybody I know at the company experiences. And I think, therefore, it is a great disservice to the reader because they're getting a very distorted picture of what's going on. Okay, that's it. I hope that was informative. See you next time.